Enough already, always showing up in front of me with that face. I absolutely despise it. Can't you do something about that face? Sorry about that. It's not like I chose to be born like this, yet every time you see me, you always complain. What? You're talking back now? You've become so cheeky lately. Just because you're 12 doesn't mean you can start rebelling against your parents. I was born blind in my right eye, which caused it to enlarge slightly, making my face look unbalanced. My mother was so appalled by my appearance when I was born that she considered abandoning me, but was scolded severely by her parents and reluctantly decided to raise me. She has complained about this to me many times. That's rich, coming from you, who raised me out of obligation and now pretends to be a parent. I've never once thought of you as my parent. My mother looked at me with eyes as if she was looking at something she despised, without showing any emotion other than anger. It's so noisy first thing in the morning. What's with you guys? Let me sleep in on a day off, will you? You should say something to her too. You must dislike her face just as much, right? What? Of course, I dislike that disturbing face. It's your fault for giving birth to such a child, forcing us to take care of her. We should have gotten rid of her a long time ago. It doesn't matter what your parents said. I know. As soon as my father woke up, my mother started speaking harshly in front of me, casually mentioning getting rid of me and disturbing face. I knew that my father only saw me for my appearance and disliked me from the start. To me, they were just an unpleasant uncle and aunt who fed me. I see, so that's all you think of me. I wasn't sad. I knew they were that kind of people, so it didn't matter to me. Yes, a failed, worthless human like you. I have no recollection of giving birth to you. My mother suddenly said that and went to whisper something to my father. I couldn't hear what they were talking about, but I knew they were plotting something. What? If you have something to say, just say it clearly. Nothing. Anyway, we have errands to run this morning, so we'll be leaving soon. My parents started eating, then hurriedly prepared and left somewhere. They often left in the morning and came back at night, so I didn't think much of it at the time. But they didn't return that day, and 3 days, a week, a month passed. I could bear it if it was just a week, since it happened once before. But a month? Were we clearly abandoned? Confused, I decided to call my maternal grandparents, the only number I knew, to see if they had heard anything. Hello, Grandpa? Anna, what's up? Why the sudden call? Have you heard anything from Mom? From Dorothy? No, I haven't heard anything. I told my grandfather everything about the last month, the verbal abuse from my mother, the verbal abuse from my father, and the fact that I was raised out of obligation. Dorothy did that. And they haven't come back for a month? Are their belongings still there? Yes, what should I do? Come to our house. I'll come to pick you up in an hour. An hour later, my grandfather came to pick me up in his car. And I ended up living at my maternal grandparents' house. It seems Dorothy raised you reluctantly because we told her to properly raise her child. I can't help but think maybe we should have taken you in and raised you ourselves. I really put you through a lot of trouble. I'm sorry. I'm disappointed that Dorothy turned out to be that kind of person. It's not your fault. It's Mom to blame. Because I'm blind in my right eye and it's enlarged, making my appearance unpleasant. She despised me for that alone. The last thing she said, "I don't remember giving birth to something like you," was the only thing that really hurt me. I didn't think of her as a parent, but I was grateful she gave birth to me. Those words from my mother suddenly pierced my heart, and tears started to flow. Seeing this, my grandfather handed me a handkerchief and spoke to me in a gentle voice. Dorothy has always been like that. A person who judges others by their appearance and looks down on them. She's the one who doesn't understand anything. Just wait and see, you'll prove how capable you are in the future. 12 years later, I lived in my grandfather's house, learned various things. Started a company, and became a CEO with an annual revenue of $150 million at a young age. Then, having heard rumors, my parents came to my company and bowed their heads to us. And that's when my parents' downfall began. My name is Anna, and I was born blind in my right eye, causing it to become enlarged. Raised by a mother who disliked my appearance until I was 12. I endured verbal abuse about my looks. My mother was straightforward and judged people by their appearance, unhesitatingly complaining about people she disliked right in front of them. Really, can't you do something about that face of yours? I get sick every time I see it. I clearly remember being told such things when I was just 3 years old. As she touched my enlarged eye, she often tampered with my face and used my blindness to her advantage. By placing obstacles at my feet to make me trip, a minor thing, but still a form of mischief. Why can't you see that right in front of your feet? Be more careful, you're such a failure. As I grew older, the harassment escalated, and my father, who turned a blind eye, offered no help. When I sought help, I was shunned with, "Don't come near me because you're disgusting." There was no one in my family to stand by me. Mom talked about my eye again today. Am I not seen as a child? Every day, I would talk to my dolls in my room and cry. Shocked that my mother did not see me as her child and unsure what to do. But by the time I was 12, my affection for my parents had completely vanished. And I decided to resist rather than be mistreated any longer. Don't mess with me. You always call me disgusting and a failure. But aren't you the real failures for looking at your child that way? Such verbal exchanges became common with my mother. She fought back, but I didn't want to lose, so I resisted desperately. Around this time, my parents began to leave the house more frequently. I'm going out. That was all she would say, so I had no idea where they were going. When I was younger, they would return after half a day or a day, but recently, they would not come back until late at night, and sometimes they would be gone for a week. However, when my suffocating parents were not around, I felt relieved. And their meaningful actions worked in my favor. Anna. Do you want to study more? My mother suddenly said this. I wanted to attend middle school and had plans to apply and take the entrance exams for the school of my choice. But she unilaterally canceled my application and prevented me from going to middle school. Why? What are you thinking? What are you talking about? You don't need middle school. Why do you think someone like you, a failure, can go to the same school as normal people? Get over yourself. Failure, failure, you always belittle people like that. Why do you hate me so much? Why won't you let me do what I want? You're not human. You can't see with your right eye. It's larger than normal, making your appearance inferior to others. Don't act like you're the same as everyone else. Being told by my mother that I was not human shocked me. My mother had never gone that far before, but facing me, she finally did. The words from my mother that pierced my heart the most. Why do I have to be told such things? I'm alive and talking like a human. Saying I'm not human is just cruel. The phrase "I'm not human" was too frustrating. I had resolved in my heart to refute everything I had been told, and to out-argue my mother's reasoning. But those words broke my spirit, leading me to seclude myself in my room and cry every day. As she declared, my mother withdrew my middle school application and started to neglect me at home. Your dad and I will be gone all day today. She would say that and leave, leaving only a little food behind, which I had to prepare and eat myself. Though manageable for a day, the duration of their absences began to extend to 3 days. A week, longer. Where could they always be going? On a certain day, while harboring these doubts, my parents returned home carrying big bags. We're home. I had never reacted so strongly before. But seeing them come in with gift shop bags and dressed like they had just come back from a trip, I was taken aback and couldn't help but exclaim out loud. What's that? Where have you been? Oh, how unusual for you to ask such a thing. Do you want to know? No, not really. Irritated by my mother's unnaturally cheerful demeanor, I acted disinterested, though I was curious. But my mother started talking about it as if she wanted to. Actually, we went to Hawaii. I thought, I thought so. They're wearing aloha shirts and had sunglasses on their heads. They must have had a good time. At that moment, I was certain. My parents' frequent absences were due to them going on trips without me. They didn't want to show the world my shabby face, so they left me behind to avoid that. Whatever, go do whatever you want, scum. My mother's gleeful tone irritated me, and I blurted out those words coldly. Perhaps angered by my response, my mother slapped me without a word. What's with that dull response, mocking me? What do you mean by that? What do you expect me to say to insensitive parents going overseas without their child? Don't mess with me. I glared fiercely at my mother and retreated to my room. I was appalled by my parents' despicable behavior and didn't even want to see their faces. Too upset to cry, I just curled up in the dark room, emptying my mind on the bed without thinking about anything. Maybe it would be better to just run away from this house than to live like this. That thought crossed my mind. But what could I do at the age of 12? Even if I ran away, my parents wouldn't come looking for me. But I realized I had no means to live on my own and ended up staying at home. The next morning felt different somehow. My mother was in a bad mood. Was she still upset about yesterday's incident? As I was about to go to the bathroom, I was greeted by the usual scolding from my mother. Enough already, always appearing in front of me with that face. I can't stand it, can't you do something about that face? But her tone wasn't light as usual, it was heavier, adding a weight to my feelings. What followed was an argument between me and my mother. And after whispering something meaningful to my father who had just woken up, they left the house a few minutes later, never to return. After being absent from the house for a month, I was convinced I had been abandoned. Remembering my earlier thoughts of, maybe I should just leave this house, I felt a bit teary. I was glad my parents were truly gone. But the overwhelming feeling of being completely alone brought on anxiety. I'm lonely. I'm starting to feel lonely now that I think I've really been abandoned. Mom. Dad. In the midst of feeling lonely, thoughts of my mother and father briefly crossed my mind. However, those feelings were quickly overshadowed as I thought of someone else. My maternal grandfather, who often took me to his home and where I had stayed many times as a child. It must have been because I lacked the ability to live on my own back then. So he would take me to his place, not to leave me alone at home. Remembering my kind grandfather, I called the only number I knew of him and told him everything that had happened. Mom told me, she said I'm not human. She called me a failure and said she raised me out of obligation. Hearing my grandfather's voice after such a long time brought me relief. And as I poured out my heart, tears welled up uncontrollably, and I broke down crying on the phone. I hadn't realized how much I needed to cry until that moment. Come to our house. I'll come to pick you up right away. His kind voice over the phone comforted me, and I waited for him to come. That very day, I was taken to live with my grandfather. How are your grades, Anna? His sudden question puzzled me, and I asked back, why? In response, he handed me a pamphlet. A middle school brochure? Yes. Anna, you weren't allowed to go to middle school, were you? Why don't you give it a try? Midterm admissions are possible. And don't worry about the money, I'll take care of it. Go there and study hard. Don't you want to study? I love studying. I hated being with my parents so much that school became my sanctuary. And I had many friends. But now I can't see them anymore. Well, you can always make new friends. And about your eye, your parents did nothing about it, right? How about getting surgery? It won't bring back the light, but it might help with the imbalance. Really? Would you do that for me? Of course. If it makes you healthier and happier, I'm willing to spend whatever it takes. Don't worry, I have plenty of savings. There's no point in saving it for my old age if I can use it for you now. I was overjoyed. My grandfather was willing to help me attend middle school. And even get surgery to improve my condition. Which did make my appearance somewhat better after getting a prosthetic eye. Starting anew, I enrolled in high school and later, my grandfather suggested something. You truly are my granddaughter. You've inherited the good traits. Inherited what? Not just your exceptional grades in math, but also your overall academic performance. With brains like yours, why not study business management? Business management? Yes, why not learn how to manage a company? Then you can give those foolish daughters a lesson. I was initially surprised by my grandfather's suggestion, but felt it was a chance to prove myself against my mother and her demeaning views. My grandfather occasionally checked on my estranged parents through his smartphone, allowing me to keep up with their whereabouts indirectly, without revealing my presence at the family home. I had hoped your mother would learn business management and take over the company I managed. But she chose her own path, leaving home and only returning to drop you off. Such a disgraceful child. Grandpa, does that mean I'll take over the company? Well, the original company is gone, but a subsidiary survived. They've been looking for a successor, and it seems like a good opportunity for you. Your intelligence should serve you well in business management, so give it a try. Following my grandfather's advice, I enrolled in a business-focused high school, graduated, and learned more about being an entrepreneur. By the age of 20, I was put in charge of the subsidiary. And by 24, my business acumen had flourished, achieving an annual turnover of $150 million. Over 12 years, I gained financial independence and a more presentable appearance. Anna, you've done well. I never imagined you'd have such business talent. Even in my prime, I couldn't achieve a turnover of $150 million. I'm glad to have discovered your potential. No, it's all thanks to you, Grandpa. If you hadn't told me to come to your house, I couldn't have grown so much. Who knows what would have become of me otherwise? Imagining myself left behind in that old apartment made me shudder. While my grandfather and I were indulging in our nostalgic thoughts, his phone suddenly rang. Hello? Dad, I was hoping to talk to you about something. Is it okay if I come over this evening? A favor? What's all this about all of a sudden?
Yeah,
I think I mentioned it in a message before, it's about money. You never learn, do you? I've always tried to teach you to handle these things properly. You know this happens because you never listen. I'm really sorry. Anyway. All right, come over. I'll listen to what you have to say. The caller was my mother, discussing money matters. My grandfather's face remained emotionless as he dealt with the conversation, exuding an attitude of looking down on her. Mom? Yes, it was Dorothy. She'll be coming over this evening. It's a perfect opportunity for a comeback, Anna. Make sure you're here. But I'm a bit scared. Don't worry, you're not 24 anymore. If it makes you feel better, bring your boyfriend. Having a strong man around might give us an advantage. Especially since your father will be there too. It's just a precaution, in case anything happens. My grandfather reassured me with a wink, lightening the mood. By then, I had a fiancé who worked with me as the vice president of our company. A young talent who had stayed with the subsidiary when I took over. He had always supported me, becoming my partner in both business and life. Fiancé chairman, this is so sudden. I've heard about it from Anna. But this might be too much for me. Stop calling me chairman. That was back when I was with the company. Now, I'm just a retiree living a quiet life. You've been Anna's partner all this time and you're strong. I can rely on you. Come on, it'll be fine. Convinced by my grandfather's forceful persuasion, my fiancé eventually agreed. Even managing a laugh. Thank you. I'll see you this evening. I hadn't expected to reunite with my parents so suddenly. Despite my fears, I tried to calm my nerves. Finishing up work before returning home with my fiancé as per my grandfather's instructions. For now, you two hide in the next room. I'll start the conversation. When I hit the table, that's your cue to come out. My fiancé and I agreed and hid in the adjacent room. Dad, it's been a while. Sorry for dropping by like this. I could hear my mother's high-pitched voice from the other room. Just hearing it made me freeze in fear for a moment. Are you okay? You look terrified. Do you think you can handle this? He comforted me as I trembled, rubbing my back to soothe my nerves. You mentioned something about needing money over the phone. What's going on? Actually, I've gotten into some debt, and I need a substantial amount to pay it off. I was hoping to borrow some money from you. I don't have money to lend to you. Whatever your situation, you're an adult, you need to take responsibility for your debts. What kind of adult at 50 still doesn't get that? Then why did you ask us to come here? You could have just said no over the phone. Let me ask you something. What about your child? Huh? Child? What about Anna? I'm asking if you've properly raised her. You hardly ever contact us, never visit, and barely mention Anna. She should have gone through middle and high school by now. She should be working at her age, but we haven't heard a thing from you. What's the meaning of this? It all depends on the child, doesn't it? I did my part, made sure she went through middle and high school. And watched over her until she became an adult. I don't know which company she joined, but she must be enjoying herself, right? My mother's voice dropped, the initial shrillness giving way to a rougher tone. It sounded like the voice of someone hiding something. Pressing my ear against the sliding door, I started listening intently to the conversation between her and my grandfather. I see. So, who was the one who called this house 12 years ago? Huh? Dorothy, where were you for an entire month, 12 years ago? On a trip? Leaving your child alone for a month, what were you doing? What? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I'm going to make you spill everything. About Anna, about your financial situation. All the truth. My grandfather's shout was a signal for us. I slid the door open with force and appeared in front of my mother. Long time no see. Do you recognize me? Huh? Oh, you. Anna. Seeing me suddenly appear. Both my mother and my silently sitting father were shocked, their eyes wide open. Why are you here, and how come your eye is? My eye isn't healed. I had surgery to remove it and now I have a prosthetic eye. And as for why I'm here, you left me in that house 12 years ago. Grandpa told me to come here, and he took me in. I threw those words at her, driven by emotion. Honestly, I was scared. My body trembled, but I mustered all my courage to confront her with the truth. Wait, so? She raised her voice, glaring at my grandfather with a look of defeat. Don't joke around, what is all this? Don't you understand the situation? I told you to tell us everything. The fact that Anna is here should make it clear what needs to be discussed. I won't let you pretend to forget. With that, my grandfather exerted pressure, and my mother faltered. Sitting back down and beginning to talk, looking down. What do you want me to say? What do you want to know, Anna? Why did you leave me alone in that apartment 12 years ago? What were you always leaving the house for? My mother sighed deeply before beginning. At that time, we indeed disappeared from the apartment. We were looking for a new place to live, and within a month, we found a new apartment and moved in. So you really didn't want me around? Yes, I couldn't stand being with a child with such an ugly face. After our fight that day, I decided to leave you behind as part of my plan. I always thought so, but you really are the worst mother. How could you do that to your own child? Accept a face like that? Plus, a child born blind in one eye? A burden right from the start? I hated the idea even more. As the argument between me and my mother escalated, my fiancé, unable to stand it any longer, stepped forward, glaring at her as he began to speak. What's so wrong with Anna, huh? One eye not seeing? Her face being different? I've seen her childhood photos, and I thought she looked perfectly normal. How could you say such awful things to an innocent child? You're the worst. What? You. I've been wondering who's been lurking behind Anna. Don't butt into a family argument. She's my dearest partner and the president of our company. How could I not protect her? My mother was taken aback by his words and suddenly grabbed me by the collar. What did that man just say? You're a company president. Someone lower than me acting all high and mighty, don't be ridiculous. Lower? Who's lower, exactly? Just so you know, the company you're at is a subcontractor for the company I manage. What? What do you mean? If you're a subcontractor, that means information flows to us. If you were working for our company as a subcontractor, you should have been receiving a decent salary. Struggling to repay debts doesn't make sense. You're lying, aren't you? My pointed question visibly unsettled my mother. That's when my father, who had been silent till now, finally spoke up. Hold on, Dorothy, don't jump to conclusions. He attempted to silence my mother, as if trying to hide something. However, she shook him off and began to spill the truth. Yes, I'm lying. We were planning to move abroad, cut off all ties here. It turns out it's more expensive than we thought, so I figured, why not squeeze some money out of Dad now, of all times? What's wrong with that, huh? With that admission, my father looked defeated, while my grandfather's anger peaked and he slapped my mother across the face. I've always known you had a bad streak, but this is unbelievable. You ungrateful wretch, planning to extort money from your own parents, enough. Let me tell you, with a personality like yours, you're only going to face hardship in life, just like your mother did. You're in for a world of pain. Turning his ire towards my father, my grandfather approached him next. And you, Steve, what were you thinking, staying with her? Birds of a feather flock together, is it? I thought you were a decent person when you asked for her hand in marriage. Are you trash too? No, it's not like that. I was just. Can't believe you'd say such things. I've heard from Anna about the terrible things you've said to her. Disgusted by her face, weren't you? Stop, please, I was just influenced by Dorothy, not really. Influenced? So, you're just a follower, huh? Picked the wrong person to associate with, unfortunately for you. That was the first time I saw my father look so scared and weak, easily swayed by others. Perhaps it was because he had met my mother that he could act so arrogantly when they were together. Feeling this, I started to see my father as the most pitiable person at that moment. Oh, I see, what a pitiful man. Enough, Steve has nothing to do with this, it's all my fault, right? What do you want, calling me here? Revenge. For all the pain I endured as a child, I'm going to make sure you experience it. What do you mean? For starters, you're fired. You've been enjoying a good salary, but that's over now. That's it? With my skills, I can find another job easily. You think so? I will sue you for everything you did to me during my childhood and take it to court. That's impossible, it was 12 years ago. Did you think I hadn't looked into it? What you did to me constitutes child abuse, neglect, and domestic violence, and there's solid evidence for it. Even if it happened decades ago, I can still bring it to court after consulting about it. The harm I've suffered from you is immeasurable. Even this eye, which could have been fixed with surgery, you neglected for 12 years. You didn't want to spend money on me, did you? That's why you left it untreated, right? That's clearly child abuse. So, what? You want money from me? Show some sincerity. You neglected your own child to this extent. If it weren't for Grandpa, where do you think I'd be now? I went back to the apartment later to collect my things. You were gone. Left on your own, and now you're saying all this? My mother remained unyielding, intent on bulldozing her way through with her stubbornness. But that was impossible. I broached the subject of the lawsuit once more. I've consulted a lawyer about the child abuse, neglect, and domestic violence, among other charges against you. It looks like we can claim around $100,000 in damages. And that's a conservative estimate. If that's not enough, we can ask for more. The paperwork is ready to go. Wait, are you serious? There's no way I can pay $100,000. Pay up, you scum. Do you have any idea how much I've been through mentally? I don't know. My mother's face finally showed signs of agitation. Her eyes darted around, and she began to falter. Wait, why do I have to pay if I just came to get money? Like I said, people with your kind of personality are bound to suffer. Life doesn't always go your way. From now on, Dorothy, you will live your life atoning for what you've done to Anna. I won't help you, nor you, Steve. At my grandfather's final words, my mother collapsed, crying. What emotions those tears held, I couldn't say, but they seemed like tears of frustration to me. The trial will proceed, and you will definitely pay. I handed her a piece of paper and had her write down her current address. It was crucial for filing the lawsuit. After wrapping up, my fiancé and I escorted my parents to the door, making sure they were completely gone before returning inside. A few days later, the lawsuit was accepted, and we won. I was really touched by your words. How could I not protect her, my dearest partner and the president of our company? If it weren't for that, I might have given up. My mom was pretty scary. I'm glad you were able to confront your mom and settle the past. And now that the money's coming in, everything's looking up. So? Yes. Huh? You proposed amid all the chaos, right? I kind of sensed it. Let's get married. And so, my fiancé and I decided to marry at that moment. A year later, we were married and soon blessed with a baby in our lives. Our lives were smooth sailing, but my parents ended up divorcing after a tumultuous time together. My father returned to his parents' home after decades, only to be ignored and live in solitude. My mother tried to return home but was turned away by my grandfather and disowned. She now lives alone in a small apartment, as I heard from my grandfather. People should live their lives honestly and diligently. Living deceitfully and manipulatively, like your mother and father, will eventually lead to suffering. That's what I've learned. So make sure to properly educate and raise your child. My grandfather passed away due to old age shortly after saying this, when our child was born. My husband and I moved into my grandparents' house, full of memories. And now we're building a happy home with our child.